Hi everyone, welcome to another video on AWS Lambda. In this video, we will be talking about Lambda triggers. Triggers are a way of invoking your Lambda function. So far, what we have seen is that we created Lambda function and we invoked it from the Lambda console itself. And today we'll see how we can configure other AWS services so that it can trigger our Lambda for us. Let's start with triggers. So what are triggers? Triggers are resources that you configure so that another AWS services can invoke your Lambda function. AWS provides you a list of services that you can use or basically configure so that it can invoke your Lambda function. Not all the AWS services can be used as trigger, but there are a lot of different services that you can use to trigger your Lambda function. And you can have multiple triggers for your single Lambda function. And when you have multiple triggers, in that case, each trigger acts as an independent client, meaning it invokes your function independently without being affected by any other trigger that you already have. So let's say if you have two triggers for your same Lambda function, let's say you have configured API gateway and S3 bucket to act as a trigger for your Lambda function. So in that case, even if two events happen simultaneously, even if let's say S3 bucket and API gateway triggers your Lambda at once, in that case, Lambda will receive only one event at a time. So either it would be first from the S3 bucket or from the API gateway, but not both at the same time. So the event that Lambda is going to receive will always be from only one event. Let's look at some of the common use cases as to when you would like to create a trigger or what type of trigger you would want to create. And we will look at 4 such use cases. The first one is resource lifecycle event, meaning we want to invoke our Lambda function whenever something is happening with our resource. For example, you have an S3 bucket, and if someone is adding any image to it, you want to invoke your Lambda function so that it does some sort of processing. Or you might want to, let's say, invoke a Lambda function when you are adding something in your DynamoDB table. So basically, it is based on the resource if there is any change to it. The another use case would be HTTP request, meaning you want to expose your Lambda function to outside world. And let's say you are creating some backend APIs, and what you can do is you can create your logic in your Lambda function, and then for the endpoint, for the API endpoint, you can use API gateway, which will give you an, let's say, endpoint that you can expose to your users. And whenever your users make a request to that endpoint, then that endpoint, let's say the API gateway, will then invoke your Lambda function. So meaning you can use HTTP requests to invoke your Lambda function. Third type of use case would be, let's say you have some sort of queues or stream data that you want to process. So in that case, your Lambda can read items from the queue or from the stream itself, and then it can invoke itself. And the fourth example would be, let's say you want to invoke your Lambda function in some sort of a schedule, either let's say every minute, every hour, or let's say you have some cron expression, meaning you want to invoke your Lambda function on every Sunday. So basically to run any scheduled jobs. So we will look at all of these examples. We'll look at least one of the AWS service for creating such type of triggers. So this video will be more of an introduction to different tools that you can use, or let's say different AWS services that you can use to create triggers for your Lambda function. We will not dive deep because they will require their own playlist for that. So we'll start with S3 bucket, meaning we will create a trigger such that whenever we add a new file to our S3 bucket, then it will invoke our Lambda function. For the second example, we will use API gateway to create an endpoint, and whenever user make a request to that endpoint, it will invoke our Lambda function. For the third one, we will create a simple SQS, and whenever we add a message to that queue, then our Lambda will then invoke itself. And for the fourth one, we will create a rule from the EventBridge service, and then we will invoke our Lambda function every 1 minute. Okay, now let's go to our Lambda console and see how we can create these different types of triggers. I have logged into my AWS console, and we'll start creating triggers for our Lambda function. And for this exercise, I have already created a Lambda function, and let's see what that Lambda function does. So here is my Lambda function. The name is my Lambda function. And what it does is it basically prints the event that it receives, and it returns hello from Lambda. So for the trigger, we'll start with S3 bucket, and then we'll move to other triggers. So to create a trigger, what you can do is you can scroll all the way up and click on add triggers, or you can go to configuration, and in here you can select on triggers, and from here you can click on add trigger to add a trigger for your Lambda function. So for this, I will create a trigger for using S3 bucket. And for this, I have created a S3 bucket, and the name is my bucket area 51. Of course, it is after the name, the infamous area 51. And what I have done here is I have created a folder called as my images. So what I'm trying to do is I want to create a trigger such that whenever anyone uploads any file inside this folder, then I want S3 bucket to invoke my Lambda function, so that Lambda function can do some sort of processing. Okay. So for this, what I will do is I will go back to my Lambda function, and in here, after selecting the AWS service, we need to select the name of the bucket that we created, which is area 51. And in here, you can select the event type as to what type of event should trigger our Lambda function. So either if we are creating something in S3 bucket, or we are deleting something from it. So for this example, I will start with all object create event, meaning if any object is created in the S3 bucket, then it will invoke my Lambda function. And additionally, you can also specify the directory so that you can limit the invocation. Otherwise, your Lambda function will be invoked every time anyone is uploading anything to S3 bucket. So what we want to do is, when we want to limit the invocation to a specific folder, which is my images, and you can also limit this for specific file extensions, but for this example, we'll leave it empty, so that if any type of file is uploaded in this folder, it will invoke our Lambda function. And this is something important that you should notice, as AWS wants you to acknowledge this, because what it says is basically recursive invocation, meaning let's say you have you want to create a trigger when you upload an image in your S3 bucket. You want your Lambda function to be invoked, so that let's say it does some sort of processing. For example, let's say you want to resize your image whenever you are uploading something in your S3 bucket. And in doing so, if anyone, let's say, uploads a image inside my images, it invokes a Lambda function. And let's say in your Lambda function, you are resizing that image, and again, let's say you are saving back that image in the same folder, then that means a new item has been created in that same folder, meaning it will again trigger your Lambda. And Lambda will again do the processing, it will resize, it will again save it back to the same image folder, and it will again re-invoke your Lambda function. So basically, you will go into recursion, and it is going to make you bankrupt. So this is something very important. You should be always careful. Always make sure you have two different bucket, or at least you have two different directories where you are reading from and where you are writing to. Okay, so we'll click on add, and this will create a trigger for our Lambda function. And for this, the permission is already handled by Lambda function, because a Lambda function knows which bucket is going to trigger it, so it handles, it manages the permission by itself. And now what we'll do is we'll go back to our bucket. We are inside my images folder, and we'll try to upload an image here. So let's upload an image. I have this JPEG image or PNG. Okay, and I'll click on upload, and my image is being uploaded in the S3 bucket. Once this image is uploaded, then S3 bucket will then invoke my Lambda function and will provide all the necessary information for this specific image. So as you can see, the image has been uploaded. Now we'll go back to our Lambda function. We'll go to monitor, and in here you can see different metrics, and we'll go to CloudWatch logs, because by default, when you create a Lambda function, all your logs are automatically added in CloudWatch. So let's go there. Okay, I'm in the CloudWatch now, and as you can see, we have one latest log. And if we look at this, we can see that a print was the print statement that we added in our Lambda function. We can see it here, that is event received. And inside this, you can find all the details about the event. For example, this is the name of the bucket, and this is the object that was created, and basically this is the name of the file. So from here, you can use this information to do whatever you want to do with this, let's say, image. So this is how you can create a trigger using S3 bucket for your Lambda function. For the next one, what we'll do is we'll use API gateway, so that we can expose our Lambda function using HTTP, and for that we can do it from here only. So if we click on add trigger, so now we are using API gateway, so we'll select the name of service, that is API gateway. And since API gateway is a let's say independent topic in itself, we'll cover the API gateway in a separate series. For this, we don't need to go in detail. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new API. I'll make it simple HTTP API for security. I'll keep it open. Of course, this is not the recommended one. This is just for demonstration purpose. And after that, I'll click on add. And what this will do is this will create a endpoint for me, basically an HTTP endpoint for me, which I can provide to my clients or anyone. And this is the endpoint. So if I click on this endpoint, it should then trigger my Lambda function. So as you can see here, this is the response that my Lambda function returns. And in this way, what we have done is basically we have allowed any client or whoever is using this endpoint to invoke our Lambda functions. Okay, let's go back. So now we have two triggers. One is S3 bucket, where if anything happens inside the S3 bucket, it is invoking our Lambda function. The second one is API gateway, meaning whenever an endpoint is called by a user, it then invokes our Lambda function and returns the response from our Lambda function. So we have created two triggers for now. So let's go for the third trigger, and for this one, what we are going to do is we are going to create SQS, basically queue, and I have already created this. The name of the queue is my queue, and now what I will do is I'll go back to my Lambda function and I'll add the trigger. So I will select the service, that is SQS, and in here I need to specify the queue for the trigger. So the name of the queue is my queue, and I'll reduce the batch size to 1, and I'll leave everything as it is, and I'll click on add. So here you can see that an error occurred when creating the trigger. The provided execution role does not have permission to call receive message on SQS. So when we are dealing with SQS, it has basically two components in very high level, that is, one is producer, one is consumer. So the producer adds item in your queue, and the consumer is the one who asks basically receives the item from the queue. So when we are trying to add a SQS for a trigger, in this case SQS is not the one who invokes our Lambda function, but it is the Lambda function who keeps on, let's say, listening to SQS, or basically polls SQS for any new message that it has. So it is the Lambda function who is trying to read items in SQS, and if it finds that okay, there is new item, then it invokes itself. And for that purpose, you have to handle this permission yourself. Lambda is not going to do it because right now SQS does not know anything about our Lambda function. So for this, what we'll do is we'll create a policy so that this policy will basically grant access to read and delete item from SQS. So any service that has this policy can then access our queue and eventually read items from our queue and delete the items from our queue. So for this, I will go to IAM, and in here you can click on policies. We'll click on create policy, and we are going to create a new policy. We'll choose a service. So the service is SQS, and what type of permissions we want to give. So we only want to give read permission, and we also want to give a write permission, but only to delete the message. And we also want to specify the queue. Okay, we'll click on add ARN. We'll go back to our queue, and this is the ARN of our queue. I'll click on it. I'll copy it. Okay. So I think that's it. We'll click on next. We'll click on next. We can name the policy. I'll name it as read SQS items, let's say. And what this policy does is it grants read item and delete item from queue whoever holds this policy. Okay, I think that should be enough. We'll click on create policy. Okay, so now we just created a policy which can grant access to any service, the access to read items from a queue and delete items from a queue, and the name is read SQS items. We'll go back to our Lambda function, and before we add this trigger, let me go back, and if we go in the permissions, we can find the execution role that Lambda has. We'll go into this execution role, and we will attach the policy that we just created in here. So for that, what we can do is we'll add permission, basically attach policies. We'll look for our policy that we created, which is read SQS items, and we'll then attach policy, and that's it. So now my Lambda has, let's say, these two policies, and because this policy has all the required permission to access my queue, now I can go back to my Lambda function, and now I can add trigger. And if I search for SQS, let me specify the name of my queue, reduce it to 1, and click on add. Okay, so this time around we were able to create trigger using SQS. So now what will happen is Lambda will keep monitoring this queue, and whenever a new item is added in this queue, it will then invoke itself. So for that, what we'll do is we'll go back to SQS, and we have this option here, send and receive message. So you don't need to create a client. So for let's say demonstration, we can add the item from the AWS console itself. I'll name it my first message, and then I'll click on send. Okay, so your message has been sent and is ready to receive. So now that we have a new message in the queue, Lambda should have received this message and invoked it. So let's go back to Lambda, and let's go back to CloudWatch to see the new logs. Okay, so let's scroll all the way down. So here we have two latest logs. So I'll go to the latest one, and in here you can see that the print message that we added, that was event received, and in here we can look for the body. Okay, here it is. So SQS, the message that we added in the SQS was my first message, and Lambda was the one who was listening to it, and then it invoked itself with this let's say in data. Now it is up to us to do what we want to do with this data. And the reason we added the delete permission is that because when you are dealing with SQS, it is the responsibility of the consumer to delete the message from the queue once it has read the message from the queue. SQS does not automatically deletes the message. That's why we had to add the write permission as well, apart from the read permission. Okay, so now we have 3 triggers for our Lambda function. The S3 bucket, SQS, and API gateway. And for the 4th one, what we'll do is we'll click on add trigger, and we'll select EventBridge. And for this, we have not created any rule, and so we'll create a new one. Let's name it every minute, because I want to invoke my Lambda function every minute. Let's say it's not needed. Let's leave it as it is. And we want to invoke our Lambda function every minute. So we can specify the rate, that is 1 minute, and with this we'll click on add. So now we have 4 triggers for our Lambda function. The first one is SQS, where if something is added to your queue, it will invoke a Lambda function. The second one is S3. Whenever we add something in our S3 bucket, specifically in our specified folder, then it will invoke our Lambda function. For the API gateway, whenever anyone makes a request to this endpoint, it will then invoke our Lambda function and then return the response. And finally, we have created a rule, basically our schedule, so that it invokes our Lambda function every minute. Now let's go to our CloudWatch to verify that we do in fact have invocations every minute. Let's go to the latest logs, and here is the latest one. So we can see that we did receive an event, and basically this is from the EventBridge, the rule that we created and named it every minute. So from here we can understand that this invocation was from the EventBridge itself. And if we wait for a couple of more minutes, we can see multiple invocations. So I will fast forward this and show you the final result. So I have waited for a couple of minutes, and now if we go and look at the logs, we should have multiple invocations. Let's see this one. So this is the print message that we added. We have another one here and another one here. So this does verify that our Lambda function was invoked every minute. As you can see the timestamp here, it was on 57, this was on 56, and this was on 55. So yeah, this is how you create trigger for your Lambda function. So this video was only aimed at introducing you to what triggers are and what different type of triggers you can create and what different type of AWS services you can use to create trigger for your Lambda function. So if you have any questions, if you have any feedbacks, please write them in the comment section.